Hello everybody and welcome to another video. This time we're going back into the dark times of the Horus Heresy to look at one of the best transports in the entire galaxy, the Dracosan. Let's crack on. So first things first, whilst we build this thing, I think it's worthwhile saying why I love it so much, and hopefully you'll understand where I'm coming from when I say that this is my favourite transport in all of the Horus Heresy, and to be honest, my favourite in 40k. Now the initial point is that I think it looks amazing. It's a steampunk tank in Warhammer. It's really cool. It's why in Age of Sigmar the Caradron Overlords are so well loved. People like steampunk. I also think that it's a surprisingly dynamic looking model, mostly due to the shape and the fact it's got that angular side profile and it always looks like it's rolling forward. It just looks like what an assault transport should. Aggressive, angular, and always on the move, disgorging troops right in front of the enemy positions. I also love how imposing this thing is. It's based off of the Malkador chassis, but it's so much taller. It's got a bunch of superstructure around the top with a little turret and a guy sticking out that we'll see soon, and it just makes it look so massive on the battlefield, especially when you consider that the Solar Auxilia guys are really quite small next to it. I mean, this thing can even rival a Land Raider for size, and that's saying something, especially when your models are little 32mm humans and not those massive Space Marines. Another thing I really like, and I'm not a big one for rules, I often forget my own in 40k, and I definitely don't know them very well in 30k, but I do really love the armaments that this thing can take. It has a flare shield, which means it's going to survive that much longer and things can't harm it quite as well. It's got 2 hunter-killer missiles, which is such an awesome thing to have on a transport, and let's not forget, it can come armed with a twin las cannon or a demolisher cannon. I'm putting a vote right now, every transport in 40k, at least those Imperial ones, and 30k should have the option for a demolisher cannon. It's so awesome. I guess the best way I can describe this transport is that it's a whole vibe. I just love it, it's really cool. And with all that now said and done, we've reached the end of the building process. It's a really enjoyable model to build, and whilst quite expensive in terms of real money, it's a really good model to have, so if you're even remotely interested in Solar Auxilia, I recommend picking this thing up. I never plugged this, but I really should. I have an Element Games affiliate link in the description below this video, so you can go there and get a chunk off of models, which is cool, and they give me some kickback, which is always fun, but you don't have to do it at all. After all this, I primed this with Colourforge's Matte Black, which is my favourite black primer these days, goes on really nicely, and started adding all the metallics for my own custom Solar Auxilia scheme. So the initial base coat was Vallejo's steel, and I followed that up with a chunky highlight all over those highest reaching areas of Vallejo's dark aluminium, which, despite the name, is brighter. I paint these guys a lot like how I paint my Bretonnians, and by that I mean the metallic parts. I like a lot of silver trim on these, so I'm also using a glaze of Achillean green to give a nice blue tint to the lower areas. I just think it adds a lot of character to the otherwise quite dull silver parts. I'm going to come out of the gate straight away and say this is not my neatest paint job I've ever done on this channel, but it works, and when you're painting literally thousands of Solar Auxilia, it's worth just having a few shortcuts. I'd consider this almost more speed painted, or somewhere in the realm between speed painted and my normal painting level. My Solar Auxilia force are known as the Yellow Jackets, so they need a bunch of yellow. If you don't know, a yellow jacket is a type of hornet, and they're really quite nasty, so I thought it'd be cool to have a black and yellow scheme. And no, people have asked, it's not based on the Helldivers scheme. Helldivers wasn't a thing when I made up the scheme, but it's cool that it's picked up in such a good way. Hey, you do you. So I base coated a bunch of areas white, ready for the respective contrast paints to go over. A few will be green, a few will be yellow, and then I edge highlighted the entire tank very roughly with some field blue from Vallejo. I really like this colour, and it keeps it in theme with the silver areas and keeping it quite a cool dark scheme, which I like. Edge highlighting as always takes a long time and is quite boring to do, boring to watch, but it is a skill that I still absolutely recommend. Now onto something more interesting. I'm using Imperial Fist contrast paint all over the white areas where I wanted the squadron markings. That includes these side areas you're looking at now, and also in between the black parts on the dozer blade, which I think is a nice little touch. I'm also going to use a green Warp Lightning on all the lenses to add a bit more colour. Using a nice spot colour like this on your tanks is a great way to add a little bit more life into the model and not just have it be very monochromatic. And it also works on the troops as well for all the lenses on their helmets or bright lights on their backpacks. I'm also going to use top brass from Duncan Rhodes for all the brass areas. I'm making these up as I go, but again, steampunk is usually brass or copper, and I wanted to add a little bit to this tank. Again, this is another one of those things that is really quite quick to do in the grand scheme, but adds so much. So if you've got to the stage where you've base coated everything and you've got past the really dull highlighting stage, or I think it's dull, but you've got past that stage, it's absolutely worth adding these little details. It's only a little bit extra time and it really helps. As a rule, every single one of my tanks has a little guy sitting in the turret, and this is the first one who's not been holding a multi-laser, so I still put the multi-laser on the back because I wanted the tank to have one, and I usually play what you see is what you get, so I made sure that was in there. But the little screen that he's looking at was too cool to pass up. Now, once we're past all the base coating and the highlighting stages, we're really on the downward slope. There's still a fair bit to go, but it feels like you're really moving at this point. So I'm highlighting all the lenses with a brighter series of greens, ending up with livery green, which is easily the brightest and best green in the range, but you do have to build up to it. If you go straight to it, it's way too bright and too yellow, but an absolutely essential tool for those bright, shiny lenses. I'm highlighting the yellow with Ushabti Bone, which is a massive step up from Imperial Fist, just to make sure it looks really crisp and bright. As you can see, the yellow base coat isn't the best in the world. Really, I should have put more white underneath and then done a nice layer of Imperial Fist over that, but as I said, this was a somewhat speed painted tank and it still looks the part. I think so anyway. I finished off all the metallics, which are the bits we started with a nice highlight on the highest areas around the edges with Vallejo's silver. This is a really bright paint, but do shake it up before you use it, otherwise you won't see the benefits. Now I want this tank to remain quite clean, so there's going to be no weathering on this specific vehicle, and the same for all my Solar Auxilia, but there do have to be a ton of transfers. As far as vehicle transfer sheets go, the Auxilia ones are nothing special, but I think they get the job done. I particularly like all the squadron markings and the numbers and things that they have on there. It really helps sell into the utilitarian nature of these vehicles. It looks like it's a workhorse, and the numbers marking on the side really attest to that. Same as all the Imperial Guard stuff for 40k. If you can add numbers, do so. I'm not going to go in depth on how I put these transfers on, I have a whole video dedicated to that, but suffice to say there's a lot of large flat panels on this thing, so it's quite an easy process. The only thing that I'd forgotten to do after putting the transfers on was to paint the little tools that I'd attached to the back right of the vehicle. So I quickly went in with some Xandri dust, a little bit of metallic paint, and then washed it all with Agrax Earthshade to make them look a bit more like wood. And with that, this vehicle is complete. I've been gone for a while, but that's not because I'm not enjoying this. I've just got a lot in on my real life, and I'll be putting up videos as much as possible. Thank you so much to my channel members for supporting me. See you next time.